I want to get to Andrea Mitchell, NBC's longtime chief foreign affairs correspondent, who of course covers the State Department. Andrea, boy, Washington is a tough town, but to hear the Secretary of State's officials saying that he really didn't know the reason for his firing and that he was hoping to hang on, really, after all of the reports of tumult?
Well, you know that he hung on after the president tweeted, "Don't waste your time, Rex," on diplomacy with North Korea last fall when Tillerson was on his way back, was about to land at Andrews from a trip to Asia, completely humiliating and undercutting him. He never regained his footing internationally, but he felt that he was, at least because of his alignment with Defense Secretary Mattis, importantly, at least he was part of the moderating influence on the president in terms of his foreign policy. Then again, he was blindsided on Thursday with the North Korea announcement by the president at the White House without Tillerson knowing, and with Tillerson actually being in Africa, ironically, on a lengthy, quote, apology tour of the African continent after the president's startling and, terrible comments about Africa, the notable S-hole comments. So he was always doing damage control for the president overseas. Yeah. There were differences over Iran, as you know, but most importantly, differences over Russia and that investigation. And the fact is that Rex Tillerson was a terrible manager, ironically, coming from the private sector, a terrible manager with vacancies everywhere in the State Department. But in terms of his actual policies, he was more in line with the traditional policy, and very importantly, last night issued a very strong statement agreeing with the Brits and with Theresa May that Russia was likely responsible for that terrible nerve gas poisoning of a former Russian spy. And this was in contrast to the White House briefing that day.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, obviously these two never clicked. There was our reporting that Rex Tillerson had called the president a moron, and yet, as you mentioned, he survived several different dust-ups with the West Wing. Now Mike Pompeo takes over. He's the CIA director, someone the president appears to be close to, but someone who takes a pretty hard line on Russia, perhaps even harder than Rex Tillerson.
But I think what is really interesting is that he takes a much softer line on Iran than Tillerson. In other words, a tougher line on Iran and a much less accommodating line on whether the Iran deal should be preserved. I think that was a very important piece for the president. He wants to bust out of that Iran deal as early as May, and with Pompeo at his side, it is more likely that that will happen, and it will be much less accommodating to the European critics of this.
Lots to follow here, Andrea. We know you will stay on it. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.